let's go ahead and dive into the wide receiver situation, because you heard a couple of key wide receiver notes in there. Both Kyrus Jackson and Kyle Phillips down for the count right now, both expected to miss at least some time this week, may both miss the third and final preseason game of the year. And while we talked on Thursday's show about how, and if you've missed this, let me catch you up to speed, the Titans wide receiver competition is over. They are keeping 6 receivers: DeAndre Hopkins, Calvin Ridley, Tyler Boyd, Treylon Burks, Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, and Jha'Quan Jackson. Yes, he wins the competition. The 6th round rookie has done enough to impress and be the punt returner and be your 6th wide receiver on the team. He wins. So that is good news for him. And you saw last night, he led the team in receiving. I believe he went 4 for 4 on receptions for 57 yards, averaging 14.3 yards per reception. A big night for him. Really showed off his ability already as a young developing route runner to get the ball, and when he has the ball in space, show off that speed, show off that slipperiness. He's a tricky one to get down in the open field. Yet another guy I think you can fairly add to the list of Titans players who are real playmaking threats on offense when they have the ball in their hands, which is a really cool thing. So that's one of the theme of today's show is going to be things that we know, as I deemed it on Twitter last night, roster realities at this point, things that are going to be talked about like competitions this week, but they really aren't. The first of those is, and again, we knew this already before this game, Jha'Quan Jackson's the 6th receiver. He's the dude. I will allow for one exception. And while we talked about, we're pretty certain it's going to be 6 receivers, because Brian Callahan has more than once now referred to, we're going to keep 5 or 6 guys active on game day. And so that's kind of the clue we're keying off of there, as well as the way that his teams have operated in the past. He has in the last, 36 hours now, intentionally mentioned Mason Kinsey by name twice, once pre-game on Titans radio, talking about how Mason Kinsey has a chance to really solidify himself as a contributor to this team. And then once today at the press conference, he brought up Mason Kinsey semi-unprompted, saying, he's got versatility. He can play on special teams. He can play inside and out. He's got a pretty wide skill set as a depth receiver. And so him continuing to mention Kinsey makes me think that if I'm wrong about anything on the wide receiver depth chart, it may be that, and JT, I'll let you kind of explain this, there may just be room at the bottom of the 53-man roster for lack of a better word, like charity guys. Like, who wants to be on this team? Because we got room, and who's the most talented amongst you? You and I were talking about this last night. There's going to be room for some of those guys.
Yeah, I think, that game was boring to a point where in the mid to late third quarter, I just impromptu started making my first mock-up of a 53-man official roster. And so I was going down and I was checking people off. I'm like, yeah, this guy's definitely on the team. Yes. And so then after I got through all my checks, I went back down through the list and I said, damn, I only have 46 guys. There's 7 spots. There's 7 spots that could be open. And so I think the point is they're definitely, and I may have been a little shallow on guys in the defensive line room. They probably will end up keeping a guy or 2 more than I had projected in that impromptu mock. They'll probably keep another safety than I gave them, or another corner, but that's still, there still is room, after they keep a couple of those extra guys, for 1 or 2 spots where Brian Callahan may have the opportunity to kind of keep a guy on the team. I think that's the most important thing here, is that, we are going off the precedent of Brian Callahan with the Bengals and what he said, but obviously opportunities arrive with injuries and whatnot, to the point where, this may be a special situation that there just isn't that much depth on that's worth keeping on the back end, to where you can have a guy like Mason Kinsey who, plays a special role in Brian Callahan's scheme and works efficiently to the point where he actually might be a really useful tool for him this year.
Well, and we add to that the possibility of DeAndre Hopkins missing a game or 2 to begin the year. So while I am certain the top 6 receivers are the 6 we've named, Jha'Quan Jackson is wide receiver 6, I will allow a 7.5% chance that the roster comes out and they keep a 7th receiver and it's Mason Kinsey. If they do keep one, it is Mason Kinsey. I'm almost certain of that. And that's just because he keeps hinting at it, and he is the most versatile of the rest of the guys, and he offers
and available.
Yeah, and available, right? And so some people might be, listeners to the show may be like, oh, fellas, you guys came in on after the last preseason game and said it's down to the 2 Jacksons. Hey, what happened to Kyrus? Kyrus got hurt. Like that's what changed the math here. So I don't think we're being.
It's also important to note that
on that,
like available, yes, like Mason Kinsey like broke his finger last night and then went back into the game. Like he
tweeted, "I don't know what to do with my hands." After that. I don't know if you saw that afterwards. Yeah,
I did not, but
don't care. Broken fingers doesn't matter.
Continuing through his injury to be available is something that's so important to this Titans team right now, especially in the wide receiver department. When you have guys like Kyrus Jackson, Kyle Phillips, and DeAndre Hopkins go down with injury, like this is a more brittle wide receiver room than I think you would like. So having those guys who can play through injury and for are available, that's something that is invaluable.
Moving on to one last thing on the wide receivers, actually. Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, a guy that's going to make this roster, has never really been in doubt to make the roster. Played a lot of ball last night, and he caught that touchdown there at the end of the first half, and a lot of folks, myself included, were saying, why is this guy in the game? Get out of the, like, he's not just in the game. He's like running crossing routes and getting laid out, making really difficult catches and getting crushed. It's like, dude, what are we doing? Get this guy out of the ball game. I asked Brian Callahan about why he, and by the way, notably not in the game at any point, Treylon Burks, 2 guys that folks, I think, are back and forth on, okay, who's the 4 and who's the 5, who's really proven themselves to be that guy. With Burks, it's the ceiling. With NWI, he's just that constant. Why is NWI playing almost a half of football and Burks on the bench? And here's the answer from Brian Callahan last night.
I mean, we wanted to put him in position to make some plays for us, which he did. It was good to see him get in the end zone. Not that I need to see a lot from NWI. I know what he's capable of and how productive he's been. But we just, when you got as many guys as we have, he's kind of forced into action. You know what I mean? So he's got to be able to play a little bit, and hopefully it allowed the quarterbacks to play well. Sometimes there's a comfort level in having some of those types of players out there with you, and that's just kind of where you're at.
Is him playing in Treylon not a reflection of hierarchy, or is that just different guys, different situations?
Different guys, different situations, different positions too.
With injury.
Yeah.
So I found that last comment interesting, volunteering. Hey, they also play different positions. And so at today's press conference, I followed up with him, and I didn't record it. It's on my social media account at Easton Freeze on Twitter if you want to go listen to it, because I pulled it from the Titans feed. He clarified, and I'm paraphrasing, that Burks is going to be playing the X primarily, that outside boundary receiver, the direct backup to DeAndre Hopkins, and NWI is going to be primarily, and he's more versatile, so he'll play some outside, some at the Y, but primarily at that Z flanker position, which is the direct backup to Calvin Ridley. That comes as a bit of a surprise to people. Burks, we've not really known throughout this offseason where he's going to be playing primarily, if they're going to be moving him around a lot, if he's going to be a multiple guy. Early on, guys like me were clamoring, hey, maybe let's get some run in the slot for him. That's where he excelled in college. Like, maybe big slot is the spot for Treylon. This coaching staff has decided that he's going to be the direct backup to the X receiver, to DeAndre Hopkins. I don't know if I love that, but I am certainly going to defer to their expertise. And if this, I'll say it this way, if it's still the Vrabel regime, I'd be rolling my eyes at that, because I'll be like, let's try something different. It's not working so far. With this new coaching staff, new offense, I try. They have enough implicit trust from me offensively and scheme wise to at least let me see what it looks like. But in his answer, sorry not to cut you off, JT, he did say that was the biggest reason why NWI got play last night, right? Is because with already one X down and DeAndre Hopkins, we'd like to go into week 1 with our backup X intact, and that's Treylon Burks. So we don't want to risk him getting hurt. With NWI, not a big risk. Ridley's healthy. They've got more guys that can play the Y, and so they got him out there.
Somewhere out there in I believe the United States of America, there is one random person who found their way into the Titans Combine Media scrum, dancing that his question about,
right.
Hey, is Treylon Burks an X-type receiver like Jamar Chase? And Brian Callahan laughing at him. He's now who's laughing now, Brian? Because,
I mean, listen. That guy is screaming, never wrong, just early. Somewhere he probably came from Ohio, knowing Ohio.
Yes.
I think that's a good point. Great call.
I personally wasn't surprised by him, being that X or being considered the backup to DeAndre Hopkins when we really have been talking about Treylon as the guy to step up in Hopkins' absence. Like, I feel like I think that was pretty, for me at least, that was pretty cemented that, he's going to play the kind of role that DeAndre Hopkins is probably going to play. And we've seen that kind of, in that first preseason game, we saw Treylon when he was out there play that kind of DeAndre Hopkins quick in slant kind of role for Will Levis to, catch and throw. And so we're seeing, maybe when we talk about X, we're talking about, the confusion and the shock probably goes from DeAndre Hopkins' style of being an X outside receiver is different from what Treylon Burks looks like and you imagine as an X outside receiver. Yeah. And I think that's the biggest difference.
Yeah, absolutely fair. Hey, you made it to the end of the video. Thanks for that.
Want more of the latest from the Hot Read podcast? Subscribe to the channel right below.
And follow us on Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram @HotReadPod for even more segments, clips, and announcements.